Okay, the next thing that you do after you foiled is you get it ready to solder. To get a sun catcher ready to solder, you've got to pin it up. If it was a rectangular piece, instead of just using pins, you would block it up with your blocking mechanism, some rulers or yardsticks, or the straight edges that you bought at the glass store. Okay, we went ahead and foiled this rose and blocked it up. And as you can see, we use push pins around the outside to hold it in place. And each piece generally has to have 2 pins on it so that it doesn't rock and move while you're working with it. This one's ready to go. Let's show you how to do it with this practice piece. First of all, get your original pattern, lay it down, and then just start putting your jigsaw together. Jigsaw puzzle, that is. Okay, lay it out like you want it. Now, you may find that it doesn't follow the pattern exactly. And you may find, like on this rose, swing back over here for a minute, camera girl. You're going to look at it and you're going to panic. You're going to think, oh, I didn't know I left a big gap here and a big gap there. And if you want to be a perfectionist, probably not stained glass would be the way to do it. Anyway, we'll start blocking this just with 2 pins on each one. Alright, now that we've got everything foiled and pinned up, we're ready to start soldering. So the things you'll need to solder are your flux, a baby jar, a small brush, get your block of ammonium chloride ready. You'll need the holder, the iron with the sponge, and don't forget your soldering iron control. You need solder. This is the 50-50 solid core that we bought. And have your one glove ready. Okay, the first thing you want to do is get the iron hot. I like to turn my regulator up to about a little past the 5 because it needs to be warm. And I've kind of discovered that that's not too cold and not too hot. When you turn that on, especially if you're in a shop environment, you like to holler out hot iron, and maybe you'll just get in the habit of doing that. Even if you're alone, just go hot iron. It's the same as like if you're doing demolitions in the army, they yell fire in the hole 3 times to let people know what's going on. So you don't want anyone to come along and burn themselves on a soldering iron that's sitting there hot. Take the sponge and get it good and wet. I don't care if you go and get it wet in a sink or if you have some water nearby, like I do here. You get it good and soaking wet. Soften that thing right up and put it in your tray there. Okay. Get your baby jar and open it up. Get some flux and just put a little bit in there because a little goes a long way, and that'll be plenty. I'm out of flux there, but I do have another jar of it. Okay, we'll let that iron heat up and then we'll go from there. Now that you've got the iron hot, when you're soldering, one of the things you need to remember is you need to have the tip of the soldering iron clean, and that you get the best results from doing that. So when I begin, the first thing I like to do is take my block of ammonium chloride and take and run the iron around that to get some of that oxidation off. You can see it's smoking. It's cleaning it right up. Getting all of that off. Also, as you're soldering along, that's one of the reasons you have a wet sponge. You can take and clean that up quite easily. And you can see that it's very clean. One of the things I like to do is kind of test to see how well the solder is melting on that tip, and it's doing it just about the way that I like it to. So when you're not using your iron, put it back in the holder. Don't just set it down on the table. That's a good way to get yourself burned. And always watch to keep the tip away from your cord, because that plastic will melt too. Now, solder won't stick to copper like you want it to unless you use the flux. So just take your brush, dab it in that flux, put a little bit on. We're just going to do a little piece of it here. Okay, you can hold your hands like this and they'll get tired, but I like to rest them right down on the surface. With the solder in one hand, sticking out, putting it on the surface, and then you just start putting it on there. Now before I start building a bead, I like to do what's called tinning, and that ends up sticking all the pieces together. So you just take and run a real thin coat of solder all over your foil where you've used flux. I'll do a little bit more, and then I'll start showing you how to build a bead. Just take and do a thin coat, just run it along there, kind of like painting with your iron. Little gaps, fill them in. You see, you can just tin that. And I'll go ahead and tin this whole side in a minute. The next thing you're going to do after you tin the whole thing is you're going to want to build your bead. And to build a bead, hold your iron like this, take a little piece all the way down, touch that foil and lift it all the way up. All the way down, all the way up. You might need to work with a little bit. All the way down, all the way up. And kind of work yourself back into where you were. What you're trying to do is turn that solid into a liquid so that it flows. And be consistent as you can with that bead. Not too thick, not too thin. And just do as good a job as you can. Down, all the way down, all the way up. All the way down, all the way up. And maybe just touch it up a little bit as you go. It does take some practice. Now some people get really good at it, and I don't recommend that you do this, but some can just take and feed that solder as they work and build their bead that way. I'm not very good at doing that myself, but somewhat. But I recommend all the way down, all the way up. Now if you hold it too long, let's see if I can do that. If you hold it too long, you're going to get what's called a bleed through. I'm going to try to bleed some of this through on purpose so that later on I can show you how to fix that. Let's see if we can do one right here maybe. Okay, you can see this hasn't been fluxed over here. This hasn't been fluxed. So it doesn't stick on there very good. It's kind of hard to work with. Well, if you get to that point, you can go ahead and just put a little flux on top of it and redo it, and that'll work itself right in, and it'll just flow like liquid again. You can hear that sizzle. That's a good sound when you're soldering. So I'll go ahead and finish tinning this and putting a bead on this side, and we'll go from there. Once you've got all of one side tinned, you can go ahead and pull all your pins, because in effect you've already got that all stuck together. I like to pull these out because they tend to get in the way when you're trying to work on this flat surface. Which is why I like to tin before I build the bead. Now I already built a little bead here. I'll just do a little bit more just to show you. Kind of a review, remember. All the way down, all the way up. All the way down, all the way up. And it doesn't have to be a really great big gobby thing, especially on a sun catcher. And I work from the farthest away towards me so that I'm not pushing that iron and running my hand over flux. Flux is a kind of hard on your skin, so make sure that you wash your hands when you're done with it, and don't rub your eyes. And also, I'll just say, don't rub any other parts of your body that may get wet. All the way down, all the way up. You can see I'm just kind of fiddling with this too, keeping it as liquid. And I kind of, when I'm at an edge, rather than just keep going, I kind of work my way back. I make a little thing and then work my way back into it, just so it looks smooth. And the corners, same thing, just kind of touch them until it's all the way done. I'll finish putting this bead on, and I'll show you how to do this edge. Okay, I've gone ahead and finished the bead on this one side. There may be a couple of touch-ups I'll need to do. But to start doing the edge, just run some flux around it. And it's a lot like tinning. You can actually, if you want to build a little bit of a bead on there, you can, although it's not entirely needed. Just kind of paint it on there, run it around, make sure it's covered. Now every once in a while, as your iron starts to get a little bit dirty, just go ahead, touch that sponge, clean it up. If you get some blobs out here on that edge, don't worry about it yet. Okay. That's pretty well done. We'll flip it over and see what we got on the other side. Okay, I've sort of got some bleed throughs here, and that's okay. Usually they're a little bit higher than this, and let's see if I can make that bleed through a little more. Demonstrate what I mean. There's a lot of solder right there, and see if it'll bleed through. Now, if you hold your iron on the glass too long, you're in danger of cracking it. So you don't want to do it too long, and you don't want to do it too short. It's kind of a feeling that you get. And if it does crack, there are things you can do to fix that piece of glass. Replace it, actually. Okay, on bleed throughs, it's just basically treat it like that's new fresh solder, and then just touch it, and it'll bring it right back down to where it needs to go. And I'm going to go ahead and like, see if this had bled through and there was already a bead here. You can work it out. Just touch it, meld it down, work it out like it's the liquid, and then just spread it out. But it'll be okay. I'm going to go ahead and tin this side and do the edges, and then I'll show you the next thing. Now that you've got both sides soldered and build up the bead where you want it, you may want to just take and look at your piece, do little touch-ups as you feel like you need to. But again, I'm not a perfectionist, and when the piece is done, you hold it back and look at it up in the sunlight, it's usually just beautiful, even if it has a few small flaws. One of the problems with filming things on an amateur basis is you tend to sometimes not get things quite the way you want it. So you'll notice that I'm using the piece of praxis glass here, and I'm going to show you again how to do these edges. So what you'll do is you'll just put flux on a little piece of it, by the way, this is a good spot to use your glove. You can get away without it sometimes, but it's easier if you use it. Okay, have your solder unrolled so that it's sticking up, and then take a little bite of it and put it on the edge that you just put some flux on. And I work that on there. And it's kind of like building a small bead. Roll it a little bit more, use a little more flux, and on until you go all the way around it. It's actually pretty simple. And that'll join everything up. When you're done doing that, take your piece and look at it on both sides. Do any touch-ups that you need to do, and then after that you can apply your jump ring. Okay, jump rings are just these little tiny pieces that you can get at a craft store. And to put one on your glass, you'll take a couple of push pins and move it kind of close to the edge of where you're working. And I just like to do that just to hold the glass still, because I'm going to be pushing it on. You'll need a pair of needle nose pliers. If you don't have any, use your grozers. But I like to use the needle nose pliers better. Get a good grip on it. Again, have your solder ready. Have it just poking up a little bit so that you can grab a little piece of it. Take and put some flux on your jump ring and put it right where you're going to hold it. And you're going to have to be kind of sturdy with this and apply just enough pressure just to hold it in place. I can't seem to get that to work. Okay, now just take a little bite of solder on your soldering iron, hold it in place, just touch it, hold it till it solidifies, let it go. Now you can just leave it like that, or you can go ahead and put a little more solder on it, but be careful not to hold your iron on that too much, or the solder will melt too much and the ring will fall off. So we'll put a little more on there real quick. Okay, and pull your pins out. Let me see what I've done here. I'm going to clean that up a little bit. Again, don't hold the iron on there too long. You can clean it up, let it solidify. Okay, that should work pretty good. Okay, so now we got the rose, a jump ring. It's in a spot where it's going to have some structural support.